My hands trembled as I clutched the edge of the wooden table. His shadow loomed over me like a storm cloud ready to burst. "From today you belong to me." My father-in-law's voice was cold, sharp, and final. I could feel my knees weakening as he stepped closer, his breath reeking of whiskey. "You think because my son is dead you can walk out of this house? No, Emily, you'll stay. And you'll do whatever I say." My heart pounded so loudly I was sure he could hear it. It had been only 3 weeks since I buried my husband, Daniel. I was still wearing my black mourning dress. My eyes were still swollen from crying. But here I was, trapped in the very home where my dreams had died. Now facing a new kind of nightmare. I looked at the door. It was only a few feet away, but his bulk blocked the path. "You can't make me," I whispered. His lips curled into a smile that wasn't a smile at all. "Watch me." That's when he grabbed my wrist so tightly I gasped in pain. And in that moment I realized the real danger in my life had only just begun. My name is Emily Carter. I'm 67 years old, speaking to you from Dallas, Texas. I've lived through storms you couldn't imagine, and today I'm going to share one of the darkest chapters of my life. Before I begin, please make sure to subscribe, like this video, and click the notification bell so you don't miss the next parts of my story. And tell me in the comments, from which part of the country are you watching? I want to know where my friends are listening from. It all started 5 years earlier when my life was nothing like this. Daniel, my husband, was my safe place. We had been married for 37 years. He wasn't a rich man, but he was hardworking, gentle, and always put me first. We ran a small bakery together in our neighborhood, and the smell of fresh bread every morning felt like the scent of home. We lived in a cozy 2-story house Daniel had inherited from his parents. His father, Richard Carter, lived in a separate farmhouse about an hour away. He had always been a distant, difficult man, quick-tempered, selfish, and never satisfied with anything. Daniel rarely spoke about him, and I quickly learned why. Richard had never approved of me. On the day of our wedding, he didn't even show up. But none of that mattered because Daniel and I built our own happiness. That happiness, however, began to crumble the day Daniel fell sick. It started as a cough, then breathing trouble, then a doctor's grim face telling us it was late-stage lung cancer. I spent months caring for him. Our bakery shut down. Our savings drained. And yet, I held on, believing somehow he'd recover. But on a rainy Thursday morning in the quiet of our bedroom, Daniel took his last breath while holding my hand. I thought my world had ended. I didn't know it was only shifting into a new kind of hell. The first time Richard came to the house after the funeral, he didn't hug me. He didn't offer comfort. He just looked around at the furniture, the photos, the bakery ledger on the counter. "This was my son's property," he said flatly. I reminded him that Daniel had left everything to me in his will, but Richard's face hardened. "We'll see about that." For the first 2 weeks, he kept his distance. But then slowly he started showing up, first to check in, then to help, then to stay overnight. At first I thought it was loneliness or grief, but soon I saw the truth. Richard wanted control. Over me, over the house, over everything Daniel had left behind. One evening, I came home from buying groceries and found him in the kitchen, drinking from Daniel's favorite mug. His shirt was unbuttoned halfway, and his eyes lingered on me too long. "Emily," he said, his tone low. "You can't live here alone. It's dangerous for a woman. I'll take care of you, but you'll have to take care of me too." I froze. "I don't understand," I said, though deep down I did. He leaned closer. "You're not going anywhere. This house, you are mine now." I backed away, my hands gripping the grocery bag until my knuckles turned white. I knew in that moment, this was not grief speaking. This was something far darker. That night, I locked my bedroom door for the first time in years. My heart wouldn't stop racing. I kept hearing his footsteps in the hallway. I kept thinking about the way he looked at me. I told myself I'd find a way out. But the next morning, before I could make a plan, Richard was already waiting for me in the kitchen with a piece of paper in his hand. "Sign this," he said. I glanced at it, a legal document. It stated that I would hand over the house and bakery to him in exchange for financial support. I pushed it back toward him. "No." His smile was cold. "Then you'll regret it." He stepped closer, and what he did next made my blood run cold. He slapped the paper onto the table so hard the coffee cup beside it tipped over, spilling across the wood. His voice dropped into a growl. You think I'm asking you? I'm telling you. I stood my ground, even though my hands trembled. This house belongs to me. Daniel gave it to me. I won't sign anything. His jaw tightened. Then in one swift motion he grabbed the chair I was sitting on and yanked it backward. I stumbled to my feet, my heart hammering. You're making a mistake, Emily, he said, stepping closer until I could feel his breath on my cheek. I buried my husband 3 weeks ago, Richard. I said, my voice breaking. And you're doing this now? Something in his eyes shifted. Exactly. He's gone. And without him you're nothing. Those words sliced through me deeper than any knife could. Before I could reply, he stormed out, slamming the front door so hard the picture frames rattled. My knees buckled, and I sank into the chair. For the first time since Daniel died, I wasn't crying from grief. I was crying from fear. For the next few days he didn't come back. I thought maybe he had calmed down, maybe he'd realized how wrong he was. But I was wrong. 3 nights later, I woke up to the sound of footsteps outside my bedroom. Slow, heavy steps pacing back and forth. I held my breath, praying it was just my imagination. Then I heard the doorknob rattle. I jumped up, grabbed the phone, and whispered into it. Please God, let this line still work. It did. I called my friend Sarah, who lived 2 streets over. Emily? It's midnight, are you okay? She asked. No. Iwis parat. He's here. He's outside my room. I heard the footsteps stop. Then a voice from the hallway. Emily, open the door. I just want to talk. I didn't sleep that night. When morning came, I packed a small bag and went to stay at Sarah's for a few days. It felt like a breath of air after being underwater. Sarah tried to cheer me up. She made pancakes, took me shopping, and even convinced me to visit the park we used to go to with Daniel. For a few hours I felt almost normal again. But Richard wasn't done. When I returned home to collect more of my clothes, I found the front door unlocked. My stomach tightened. I stepped inside slowly, calling out, "Hello." No answer. Then I saw it. Every single photo of Daniel and me gone. The frames on the walls were empty. I raced to our bedroom. My clothes were tossed onto the floor, my jewelry box was gone, and in the middle of the bed sat the unsigned legal paper with a knife stuck through it. My knees went weak. My breath came in short, sharp bursts. And that's when I heard it, his voice from behind me. Still think you can say no to me? I froze. The air felt heavy, as if the room itself had stopped breathing. Slowly I turned my head, and there he was, Richard, standing in the doorway, blocking my only way out. His eyes were narrowed, his lips pressed into a thin line, and in his hand he held the same knife that had been stabbed into the paper. You went into my bedroom, I said, my voice barely more than a whisper. He tilted his head. This is my son's house. There's nothing in here that doesn't belong to me. The way he said it made my skin crawl. I took a small step backward, but the bed pressed against my legs. My pulse pounded in my ears. Put the knife down, I told him. He smiled, a slow, cruel smile. Why? Does it scare you? Good. Maybe now you'll understand that I'm not a man you can ignore. My heart raced, but I forced myself to meet his eyes. You're sick, Richard. Daniel would be ashamed of you. The smile vanished, and before I could react, he lunged forward, grabbing my arm. The knife was inches from my face. Say his name again, he hissed. Go on. Say it. I yanked my arm away with all my strength and bolted past him. My feet hit the hallway floor so hard it felt like my bones might break. I ran straight out the front door and didn't stop until I reached the end of the street. Sarah's house felt like the only safe place in the world that night. She wrapped me in a blanket and made me tea, but my hands shook so badly I could barely hold the cup. You have to call the police, she said. I can't, I replied. He's my family, he's Daniel's father. Sarah slammed her palm on the table. Family? Emily, he's threatening you with a knife. He's not family. He's a danger. I knew she was right. But part of me couldn't believe I had come to this point, terrified of the man who had once held my husband in his arms as a baby. The next morning, I went back to the house with Sarah beside me. The front door was locked, but my key still worked. Inside, everything looked normal, too normal. The papers were gone. The knife was gone. Even the photos he'd taken down were back on the walls. It was as if he wanted me to question my own memory.
The following days were quiet. Too quiet. I thought maybe he'd finally left for good. I even reopened the bakery, just to keep my mind busy. For a little while, it worked. Customers came in, the smell of bread filled the air again, and I even caught myself smiling. But the peace didn't last. One rainy evening, as I was closing the bakery, I turned to lock the door, and froze. Across the street, in the shadows, Richard was standing perfectly still, watching me. Even from a distance, I could see the smirk on his face. When I stepped closer to the glass, he lifted his hand slowly, and held up a single house key. My stomach dropped. That key in his hand was like a silent threat, a promise that no lock could keep him out. "Emily? Are you okay?" Mrs. Sanders, one of my regular customers, called from down the sidewalk. I forced a smile and waved, pretending nothing was wrong. But when I turned back, Richard was gone. The rain-slick street was empty. I hurried to finish closing the bakery, double-checking the back door and every window. My hands were shaking so badly I dropped the keys twice before locking the front. By the time I got home, the sky was pitch black. I stood at my front door for a long moment, listening. Silence. Still, I stepped inside slowly, flipping the light switch. Everything looked normal. The couch where I'd read the night before, the vase of flowers Sarah had brought me, the photos of Daniel smiling on the wall. But my gut told me I wasn't alone. I checked every room, every closet, even under the bed. Nothing. Finally, I tried to breathe. "You're just tired, Emily," I told myself. But then I saw it. On my kitchen table sat a mug of coffee. Steam still curled from the top. I hadn't made coffee. The sound of a floorboard creaking behind me made my blood run cold. I spun around, and there he was. Richard, standing in my kitchen doorway, dripping rainwater onto the floor, the key still dangling from his fingers. "You shouldn't leave your curtains open," he said casually. "People might see things they shouldn't." I stepped back until my hip hit the counter. "Get out." He ignored me and walked over to the coffee, taking a slow sip. "You used to make coffee like this for Daniel, didn't you?" He set the mug down and looked at me with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "You could make it for me too. We could keep each other company." "I'll call the police," I warned. He chuckled. "And tell them what? That your father-in-law came to visit?" My hands were clammy. I reached for the phone, but he was faster. He grabbed it from the counter and tossed it into the sink. "You're not getting rid of me, Emily. The sooner you accept that, the easier this will be." I swallowed hard. "And if I don't accept it?" His smile vanished. "Then I'll make you." That night, I didn't sleep. I sat on the couch clutching a kitchen knife, listening for any sound. The rain outside turned into a storm, thunder rattling the windows. Every shadow looked like him, every creak of the house made my heart race. When morning came, I decided I couldn't live like this anymore. I packed a small bag, ready to go back to Sarah's again. But when I stepped outside, my car was gone. In its place was a single note, taped to the mailbox. In big, block letters, it read, "You belong to me now." The note fluttered in the wind as I pulled it from the mailbox. My hands shook so badly I almost dropped it. He had my car. My only way to leave. I looked up and down the street, but there was no sign of him. Just the quiet hum of the morning, the sound of a lawnmower in the distance, and somewhere far off, a dog barking. I crumpled the note in my fist and ran back inside, locking the door behind me. My mind was racing. How did he even get the keys? The last time I'd seen them, they were in my purse, inside my bedroom. That's when it hit me. He had been inside the house more than I thought. I called Sarah from my landline. He took my car, I blurted out as soon as she answered. What? How? She asked. I don't know. I think he's been coming in when I'm not here. Maybe even when I am here and asleep. There was a pause on the line. Emily, you can't stay there. I'm coming to get you. I glanced at the door. No, it's fine. I'll take a taxi. Before I could finish, there was a knock. 3 slow, heavy knocks. I froze, clutching the phone. Sarah was still talking, but her voice seemed far away. Another knock. Louder this time. Emily, don't open it. Sarah's voice came through, sharp now. I crept toward the window and peeked through the curtain. My breath caught in my throat. Richard was standing on the porch, holding my car keys in one hand, and a bouquet of flowers in the other. I opened the door just enough to speak. Give me my keys, Richard. He smiled like this was some kind of game. I just wanted to bring you these, he said, holding up the flowers. They're from the garden at the farmhouse. Your favorite, white lilies. I didn't take them. The keys. His smile faded. Come to dinner tonight. Just you and me. At my place. You can have the keys after. My stomach twisted. No. He stepped closer. Emily, you're starting to make me angry. And you remember what happens when I get angry, don't you? I slammed the door in his face and locked it, my hands trembling so badly I almost dropped the bolt. I leaned against the wood, listening to his footsteps fade. That night, I stayed with every light in the house on. I didn't know if he'd come back or not, but I couldn't take the risk. Hours passed. Midnight came. And then, just when I thought I might be safe, I heard the sound of tires in the driveway. I peered through the curtain, and my car was back. But it wasn't alone. Behind it sat Richard's old pickup truck, headlights still on, engine running. And he was just sitting there, staring at my house. The headlights poured through my living room window, casting long, blinding beams across the floor. My chest tightened as I peeked through the curtain again. Richard hadn't moved. He was still in the driver's seat, his silhouette frozen, his face hidden in shadow. I stepped back from the window, my heart pounding so hard it felt like it might burst. Part of me wanted to call Sarah, but I knew she'd tell me to call the police, and I still couldn't shake the fear of what Richard might do if I involved them. Minutes passed. 10, 15, 20. The truck's engine idled like a low growl in the night. I felt trapped, every second stretching longer than the last. Finally, the engine cut off. I heard the creak of the truck door. My pulse spiked. Footsteps crunched on the gravel driveway. Slow, deliberate. I held my breath, clutching the kitchen knife I'd been keeping nearby. The footsteps stopped right outside my front door. Then came the sound of keys jingling. I lunged toward the deadbolt and twisted it hard, praying it would hold. The knob rattled once, twice, then stopped. Silence. Then his voice, low, calm, almost mocking. You locked me out. That's not very polite, Emily. I stayed quiet, frozen in place. I could come in if I wanted to, he continued. But I'll let you think about what you're doing. You have one more chance. Tomorrow night. Dinner at my place. Or I come back, and I won't be so nice. My hands were shaking uncontrollably. I didn't answer. After a long pause, I heard his footsteps retreating. The truck door slammed. The engine roared back to life, and the sound faded into the distance. I didn't sleep at all that night. Every creak of the house, every rustle of the wind outside made me jump. I kept replaying his words over and over in my head, one more chance. By morning, I'd made up my mind. I wasn't going to his farmhouse. But if I was staying here, I needed help. I called Sarah again and asked her to come over. She brought her brother, Michael, a tall, broad-shouldered man who used to work as a security guard. Michael walked through the house, checking every door and window. "Your locks are weak," he said. "If he really wants in, these won't stop him." "I know," I said quietly. He looked at me. "Emily, this isn't going to stop until you make it stop. Either the police, or you leave this place for good." For the rest of the day, Sarah stayed with me. We cooked, talked, and tried to keep my mind off Richard. It almost worked. But as the sun went down, the fear crept back in. I couldn't stop glancing out the window. And then, just after midnight, a shadow moved across my backyard.
The shadow slid across the grass like it was alive. My breath caught in my throat as I moved to the window, careful not to make a sound. It was him. Richard was in my backyard, walking slowly along the fence line, his flashlight beam cutting through the darkness. He wasn't looking for something, he was inspecting, measuring, studying. My heart pounded so hard it felt like my ribs might crack. Sarah was asleep on the couch, her breathing slow and steady. I didn't want to wake her unless I had to. I slipped away from the window, crouched low, and made my way to the back door. I pressed my ear against it. The soft crunch of his boots on wet grass was getting closer. Suddenly, the flashlight beam shone directly through the back door's glass panel. I dropped to the floor, my hand over my mouth. The light moved away and I heard a faint jingle keys. I looked up just in time to see the doorknob turning slowly. "Sarah," I whispered urgently, shaking her shoulder. She stirred, eyes half open. "What's wrong?" "He's here," I mouthed. Her eyes widened instantly. She sat up, reaching for her phone, but I shook my head. "No sound," I whispered. We crouched together in the dark, listening. The knob rattled again, harder this time. Then silence. A moment later, the sound of tapping on the glass, slow, deliberate taps. "Emily." His voice was barely above a whisper, but it carried through the stillness. "You're making this harder than it needs to be." Sarah's hand tightened around mine. After what felt like hours, the tapping stopped. I heard his footsteps retreating, then the fence gate creak open. I waited. 1 minute. 2 minutes. 5 minutes. Still no sound. Sarah exhaled slowly. "We need to leave," she whispered. I nodded. We gathered our bags quietly, planning to head to her car in the driveway. But when we opened the front door, we froze. On the porch sat a box. No note. No markings. The lid was slightly open, and inside was my wedding ring. The same one I had buried with Daniel. The sight of that ring made my blood run cold. My knees nearly gave out. Sarah's eyes darted to mine. "Emily, you buried that with Daniel." I couldn't speak. My throat felt like it had closed up. My hands trembled as I reached for the box, but the moment my fingers touched the lid, I froze again. If he had the ring, it meant he had been to the cemetery. I lifted it out slowly, my stomach twisting. The gold band was scratched, smeared with something dark. Dirt. Fresh dirt. My mind flashed to Daniel's grave. The one place I thought Richard wouldn't dare to touch. My grief turned into a burning rage, mixing with a fear so deep I could hardly breathe. Sarah whispered, "Emily, this isn't just obsession anymore. This is madness." I finished. We rushed to her car without looking back. The night air felt heavy, the streetlights casting long, eerie shadows. I clutched the ring in my fist the whole ride to her house. When we got there, Sarah locked every door and window. I sat at her kitchen table staring at the ring, my mind spinning. Why would he do this? Was it to scare me? To prove he could take anything I loved, even in death? The next morning I made up my mind. I was going to the cemetery. Sarah insisted on coming with me. When we arrived, my heart sank. Daniel's grave was disturbed. The soil was uneven, the grass torn up, the flowers I'd left days ago crushed under boot prints. And there, on the headstone, was another note in the same blocky handwriting as before. "Nothing is yours." We were still standing there when I heard the sound of a car pulling up behind us. I turned slowly. Richard's old pickup truck. He stepped out, leaning casually against the door, that familiar smirk on his face. "You found my gift," he said. I clenched the ring so tightly it dug into my skin. Why are you doing this? He shrugged. Because you're mine now. And the sooner you stop fighting it, the easier it will be. My voice shook, but I forced the words out. You'll never own me. His smile disappeared. We'll see. Then he reached into his truck and pulled something out that made my blood freeze. He pulled out a shovel. The metal caught the morning light, still streaked with fresh dirt. My stomach churned. I didn't need to ask where it had been. Richard leaned it against his shoulder like it was nothing more than a walking stick. You think the police will care? He said, his tone calm but cutting. A man tending to his son's grave? Perfectly normal. Sarah stepped forward. Digging it up is not normal. You're sick. Richard's gaze snapped to her, his jaw tightening. Careful, little girl. This isn't your business. I reached for Sarah's hand, pulling her back. My knees were weak, but I held my ground. You need to leave. Now. He took a slow step closer, the shovel dragging in the dirt. I told you belong to me. You can run to your friend's house. You can lock your doors. You can pretend you're safe. But I will always be one step ahead. I forced myself to meet his eyes. You can't scare me anymore. He smirked. Oh, I haven't even started. Before I could respond, he tossed the shovel into the bed of his truck and drove off, spraying gravel in his wake. Sarah exhaled shakily. Emily, you can't let this go on. It's only getting worse. I nodded, but inside I felt trapped. I had no proof the police would act on. He was clever, always leaving just enough doubt to make it look like I was overreacting. We returned to Sarah's house, but that night, my sleep was broken by nightmares. Richard standing over Daniel's grave. Richard in my kitchen. Richard's voice whispering through the dark. When morning came, I tried to distract myself by baking. The smell of fresh bread filled Sarah's kitchen, reminding me of the life I'd once had. For a brief moment, I felt almost like myself again. But peace never lasted long. That afternoon, Sarah went out to run errands while I stayed behind. I was kneading dough when the doorbell rang. I wiped my hands and opened the door. No one was there. I stepped outside looking around. That's when I saw it. A package on the porch, small and square, wrapped in plain brown paper. I picked it up slowly, my heart pounding. There was no return address. Inside was a single Polaroid photograph. It was me, asleep. The photo slipped from my trembling fingers and fluttered to the floor. My knees felt weak, my chest tight, as I stared at it. It was me, asleep on Sarah's couch. My blanket pulled up to my chin, my hair spread across the pillow exactly as it had been 2 nights ago. That meant he had been inside Sarah's house. I snatched up the photo and locked the door, my eyes darting to every corner of the room. My skin prickled as though he might still be here, hiding somewhere, watching. Sarah's voice echoed in my head from days before. He's always one step ahead. I grabbed my phone and called her. Sarah, you need to come home. Now. He's been inside your house. What? She shouted. How do you know? I told her about the photograph. Her voice dropped to a whisper. Don't move. I'm calling the police. Minutes later, she came rushing through the door with 2 officers behind her. I handed them the photo, my hand still shaking. One of the officers, a tall man with a square jaw, examined it. Looks like it was taken in low light. He had to be pretty close to you. My stomach turned. Do you have any security cameras? The other officer asked. Sarah shook her head. No. I never thought I'd need them. They took a report, promised to look into it, and left. But I saw the doubt in their eyes. Without fingerprints or witnesses, this would just be another piece of paper in a file. That night, we set up makeshift barricades at every door and window. Chairs under doorknobs, pots stacked near entryways to make noise if moved. I barely slept. Every creak of the house had me clutching the flashlight. Around 3 a.m. I heard it. A faint scraping at the back window. I crept to the kitchen and shined the light toward the sound. And there he was, Richard. His face pressed against the glass, smiling. The beam from my flashlight froze him in place. Or maybe it froze me. His smile was slow and deliberate, his breath fogging up the glass. For a heartbeat, neither of us moved. Then he lifted his hand and tapped the window. Once. Twice. 3 times. The sound sent chills up my spine. Sarah. I screamed. She came running from the hallway, her eyes landing on the window, and the man outside it. She gasped, grabbing the nearest object, a heavy cast-iron skillet. "Get away from here," she shouted, slamming it against the glass. But Richard didn't flinch. He leaned closer, his lips moving, forming words I couldn't hear. Sarah threw the skillet onto the counter and reached for her phone. Dialing 911. "He's here. He's outside my kitchen window." Within minutes, flashing red and blue lights filled the street. Richard disappeared into the darkness before the officers could reach him. They searched the yard but found no sign of him, just muddy footprints leading toward the woods. "This isn't enough to arrest him," one officer muttered. "But we'll keep a car patrolling the neighborhood." Sarah locked every door, but I could tell she was shaking inside just like me. The next morning, I woke to the sound of Sarah screaming from the front porch. I ran outside. Pinned to her door with a rusted knife was a note written in jagged handwriting. "You can't hide forever." Sarah's hands trembled as she pulled the note from the door, the rusted knife still clutched in her grip. Her voice was a whisper, almost like she was afraid the air itself would carry her words to him. "He knows where I live, Margaret, he knows." I took the note from her, my stomach twisting. The letters were uneven, carved into the paper like someone had pressed too hard. I knew that handwriting. I had seen it on the back of birthday cards Richard once sent to his son. That realization made my knees weak. We went inside and double-checked every window, every lock. The morning sunlight should have made us feel safe, but it didn't. If anything, the brightness only made the shadows look darker. Sarah insisted we call the police again, but they gave the same answer. Without direct evidence of a crime, there was little they could do. That night, neither of us slept. We sat in the living room, the TV on low, our ears straining for every creak and groan of the house. At one point, Sarah gripped my arm. "Did you hear that?" she whispered. I did. A soft scraping sound against the side of the house. We both froze. Then tap, tap, tap. This time it wasn't the window. It was the front door. I stood up slowly, my heart pounding so loud I thought whoever was outside might hear it. Sarah mouthed, "Don't open it." But the tapping stopped. Silence. Then, a shadow passed by the frosted glass pane beside the door. I took a step back. Sarah reached for the skillet again, her knuckles white. Before we could do anything, the doorknob turned. It wasn't locked. The door swung open. And standing there, in the middle of the frame, was Richard, smiling like he'd just walked into his own home. "You didn't think you could keep me away, did you?" he said. I froze. My breath caught in my throat. For a moment, my body wouldn't move. It was like my mind couldn't catch up to what my eyes were seeing. Richard stepped inside without waiting for an invitation, his boots leaving muddy prints on the clean rug. His smile never reached his eyes. They were cold, calculating, like a man who had already decided exactly what he was going to do. Sarah gripped the skillet so tight her fingers turned white. "Get out, Richard," she said, her voice low and shaking. He chuckled, closing the door behind him with a slow, deliberate push. The click of the latch made my stomach turn. "Is that any way to speak to family?" he asked, his voice dripping with mock sweetness. "I'm just here to check on my son's widow. Make sure she's being taken care of." I stepped between them. "You're not welcome here. Leave now." His expression shifted, the smile dropped, and something darker slid across his face. He took a slow step forward, his eyes locked on me. "You think you can stand between me and what's mine?" Before I could answer, he lunged. His hand shot out, gripping my wrist so hard I felt my bones grind together. Sarah screamed and swung the skillet, the metal making a sickening clang against his shoulder. He grunted, releasing me, but his eyes burned hotter. "You'll regret that," he growled at Sarah. In the chaos, I grabbed Sarah's arm. "We need to get out now." We ran toward the back door, but Richard's heavy footsteps pounded behind us. Just as Sarah reached for the handle, his hand shot out, grabbing her by the hair. She screamed, falling to her knees. "Let her go," I yelled, grabbing the nearest thing I could find, a glass vase, and smashing it across his arm. The shards flew everywhere. Richard roared in pain, releasing her just long enough for us to bolt outside. We ran barefoot into the yard, the cold grass wet with morning dew. My heart was hammering so hard it hurt. We didn't even think about where we were going. We just ran toward the neighbor's fence. But halfway across the yard I heard it. The sound of boots hitting the ground behind us. He was following. And when I looked over my shoulder I saw it. Richard holding a gun. The sight of the gun made my legs lock up. My body screamed at me to run, but my mind whispered it's too late. Richard's voice cut through the cold morning air. "Don't make me use this," he said, taking slow steps toward us. "I just want to talk." Sarah's breath came in short gasps. "Talking doesn't require a gun," she spat, her voice trembling. Richard tilted his head, almost amused. "You'd be surprised what people will say when they know you can pull the trigger." We backed toward the fence, but it was too high to climb in time. Richard closed the distance with every step, his finger twitching on the trigger. My eyes darted around the yard, searching for anything. A rock, a stick, a miracle. Then I saw it. The old rake leaning against the shed. I whispered to Sarah, "When I move, run for the rake." She gave a tiny nod, her eyes locked on Richard. He took another step. "You think the police will protect you? You think anyone will believe your little stories? No one cared before. Why would they care now?" The words sliced through me because he wasn't entirely wrong. We had been dismissed before. But I wasn't about to let that happen again. I made my move. I grabbed a handful of wet dirt from the ground and flung it straight at his face. Richard swore, staggering back, wiping at his eyes. In that split second, Sarah dashed for the rake, gripping it like a weapon. "Stay back!" she screamed, swinging it at him with all her strength. The metal tines caught his jacket, ripping the fabric. He stumbled, but the gun stayed in his hand. And then he smiled again. "You just made your biggest mistake," he hissed. That's when a new sound filled the air, the distant wail of sirens, growing louder. Richard's smile faltered. But instead of running, he lifted the gun and pointed it directly at Sarah's chest. The sirens screamed closer, but Richard didn't flinch. His finger tightened on the trigger, and for one frozen moment, I thought this was it. Sarah's life would end in our own backyard. "Richard," I shouted, stepping between them. "You'll have to shoot me first." He tilted his head, his eyes narrowing like he was deciding whether I was worth the bullet. Then a loud voice cut through the air. "Drop the weapon." 2 police officers were sprinting through the gate, guns drawn. Richard's jaw tightened, but he didn't lower his weapon. "Last chance," the officer barked. And then, in one horrifying move, Richard swung the gun toward the officers. The crack of gunfire exploded in my ears. I screamed and ducked, my hands over my head. The world blurred into chaos, shouting, heavy boots pounding the dirt, Sarah's panicked sobs. When I dared to look up, Richard was on the ground, blood soaking through his shirt. The gun lay just out of his reach. One officer cuffed him while the other kept his weapon trained, breathing hard. "You're safe now," the younger officer told us, though his eyes betrayed the truth. He wasn't sure if we were. They dragged Richard toward the patrol car. But as he passed me, his eyes locked on mine. "This isn't over," he whispered, his voice low but clear enough to slice right through me. A chill ran through my bones. I knew he meant it. That night, Sarah and I tried to rest, but neither of us could shake the memory of that look in his eyes. And then, just after midnight, my phone lit up with an unknown number. I answered without thinking. There was silence for a moment. And then a voice I recognized instantly. "You really think handcuffs can hold me?" I stared at the words on my phone, my hands trembling so badly I almost dropped it. "You're still mine." It wasn't just a threat, it was a claim. Richard wasn't hiding anymore. He wanted me to know. The detective grabbed the phone from my hand, reading the message with a grim expression. "We'll trace it," he said, but his tone told me it wouldn't be that easy. Richard had always been smart, too smart. That night, they insisted on sending a patrol car to watch my house. But even with police outside, I couldn't shake the feeling that he was close, maybe even watching from some dark corner I couldn't see. Around midnight, I heard a faint tapping on my bedroom window. At first, I told myself it was just a tree branch in the wind, until I remembered there were no trees near that side of the house. The tapping stopped, replaced by a slow, deliberate scratching sound. My body froze. My breath caught. I forced myself to pull back the curtain, and there it was. A handprint. Pressed against the glass. Smudged, as if the palm had lingered there, waiting. I stumbled backward, my heart pounding so loudly I thought it would wake the neighbors. By the time I ran outside with the officers, the window was empty, but on the ground below, they found something half buried in the dirt. A small, rusted key, one I recognized instantly. It was the key to our old house, the one we'd lived in before he died. And along with it, a folded piece of paper, for words written in bold black ink. Let me in tonight. I didn't sleep that night. How could I? Every creak in the house sounded like a footstep. Every shadow in the corner felt like it was leaning closer. The officers stayed outside until dawn, but Richard never showed himself. That almost made it worse, because it meant he was still out there, watching, waiting for his moment. The next day, the detective urged me to stay with a friend, but I refused. This is my home, I told him, though my voice shook. I'm not letting him chase me out again. By evening, the air felt heavy, almost charged. The kind of stillness that comes before a storm. I double-checked every lock, pulled every curtain shut, and sat in the living room with a baseball bat clutched in my hands. The house was silent except for the ticking clock on the wall. Then a knock. Not on the door. On the back window. I froze, my body locking up like stone. The knock came again. Slow. Measured. As if the person on the other side wasn't in a hurry. Against my better judgment, I crept to the kitchen and pulled the curtain back just a sliver. He was there. Richard. Not the man I had once loved, but something darker. His eyes were cold, his face thinner, his smile twisted. He lifted the rusted key between his fingers and mouthed, I told you. Before I could scream, he shoved something against the glass. It was a small leather-bound notebook, one I hadn't seen in years. My stomach dropped. It was my journal. The one I used to hide under our bed when we were married. And then, with deliberate slowness, he turned and walked toward the side of the house, disappearing into the darkness. When I opened the notebook, my hands shook so badly I could barely hold it. Every page was covered with my handwriting, but in red ink, under each entry, Richard had written notes, corrections, arguments, and one chilling message at the end. You never told the whole truth. Now I will. I dropped the journal as if it had burned me. My breath came in short, sharp bursts, and I could feel my pulse hammering in my ears. The detective's words from the previous day echoed in my mind. He's not after money. He's after control. I picked the notebook back up, forcing myself to read more, even though every word felt like a knife. In the earlier entries, from years ago, I had written about my fears, my loneliness, the way Richard's temper made me feel like I was walking on broken glass every day. But his red scrawl in the margins turned my pain into accusations. You lied here. This part was your fault. Tell them about the other man. The words made my skin crawl. The other man. I knew exactly who he meant. It wasn't an affair. It was an old friend. A man who had simply helped me one night when Richard had left me stranded in the rain. But in Richard's mind, that single act had become proof of betrayal. The final pages were newer, written recently, and they weren't in my handwriting. They were his. Line after line, he wrote about how he planned to set the record straight with proof, about how the truth would destroy me. And at the bottom of the last page, there was a date circled in black ink. Tomorrow. My hands trembled. Tomorrow he planned something, and it wasn't just about words. It was about revenge. That night, I barely moved from my spot in the kitchen. The police couldn't be there 24/7, and I knew Richard knew that. Around 3 a.m., I heard the sound again. Not a knock. Not footsteps. It was the sound of something sliding through my front door's mail slot. I rushed over, heart pounding, and saw an envelope lying on the floor. Inside was a single photograph, one I had never seen before. It was me, sleeping. My blood ran cold. He had been inside my house. And on the back of the photo, in his crooked handwriting, were 4 words. See you tomorrow, darling. The sun rose, but it brought no comfort. Every tick of the clock was a countdown to whatever Richard had planned. I locked every door, checked every window twice, and kept my phone in my pocket. The police promised to swing by during the day, but I could tell they didn't think he'd actually act so openly. They didn't know him like I did. By noon, the air felt heavy, almost electric, like the moments before a thunderstorm. I couldn't sit still. My mind replayed that photograph of me sleeping over and over. At 3:17 p.m., my phone rang. An unknown number. I answered with shaking hands. Hello. His voice was calm, almost polite. Look outside, love. I froze. Slowly, I pulled back the curtain. There he was, standing at the edge of my driveway, smiling. Not the kind of smile that showed happiness, the kind that made your skin crawl. He was holding something. A small black case. I called 911 without taking my eyes off him. But the moment I looked back, he was gone. 5 minutes later, the police arrived and searched everywhere. Nothing. No case, no Richard, no footprints. Like he'd vanished into thin air. But when I went back inside, I saw it. The black case was sitting on my kitchen counter. My knees almost gave out. I hadn't heard the door open. The locks were still in place. Inside the case was a stack of photographs. Every single one of them was me, taken from different windows at different times of day. Some were recent. Some were from years ago. And on top of the stack was a small silver key, with a tag that read, "For your front door." I screamed and dropped everything. He'd been in here before, probably more times than I'd ever know. That night I didn't sleep. I sat in the living room with every light on, holding a kitchen knife in one hand and my phone in the other. But just before dawn, I heard the faint creak of a floorboard inside the house. The sound was faint, just a whisper of weight pressing down on the wood. But in the silence of my fear, it was deafening. I didn't move at first. I just sat there, my heart pounding so loud I was sure whoever was in the house could hear it. Then it came again. A slow, deliberate creak. Closer this time. I tightened my grip on the knife. My hands were sweaty, but my fingers locked around the handle like my life depended on it, because it did. Richard. I called out, my voice trembling. I don't know why I said his name. Maybe I wanted to believe if I could talk to him, I could stop this from getting worse. Silence. I took a deep breath and stood, every step toward the hallway feeling like I was walking into my own grave. Halfway there, I caught movement in the corner of my eye. The faintest shadow slipping out of sight at the far end of the hall. Stay back. I shouted. Still no answer. Then I heard it. That low, mocking chuckle I'd heard before. It made my stomach twist. I forced myself forward, my heart screaming for me to run the other way. The hallway seemed longer than it had ever been. Like the house itself was stretching to trap me. And then, I saw him. Richard stood in the doorway of my bedroom, calm as ever. One hand behind his back, the other resting casually on the doorframe. How did you get in here? I demanded. He tilted his head, smiling that same lifeless smile. You gave me the key. My blood went cold. That silver key from the black case. He'd switched my lock before I even noticed. I just wanted to see you one last time, he said softly. But now that I'm here, I think I might stay. Then he took a step toward me, and I realized with absolute certainty that no one was coming in time to stop him. I raised the knife, my whole body shaking as he whispered, "Go ahead, show me what you've learned." The sirens grew louder, but Richard's grip didn't loosen. My lungs screamed for air, my vision shrinking into a narrow tunnel. Somewhere in the haze, I thought, this is how I die. Then a deafening bang shattered the moment. Richard's body jerked sideways, his grip loosening just enough for me to gasp. The marshal stood in the doorway, gun drawn, his voice sharp. Step away from her. But Richard wasn't done. Even wounded, he lunged toward the bedroom, toward Sarah. I scrambled to my feet, every muscle burning, and threw myself after him. We crashed into the doorway, both of us slamming against the frame. The marshal fired again. Richard stumbled, fell to his knees, but still somehow tried to crawl forward. I grabbed the nearest thing, a lamp, and swung it with every ounce of strength left in me. It connected with a sickening crack. Richard collapsed, motionless. The room went still except for my ragged breathing. Sarah clung to my waist, sobbing, her tiny voice whispering, "Grandma, he's gone, right? He's really gone." I wanted to say yes. I wanted to promise her this nightmare was over. But then the marshal's radio crackled, and the words froze my blood. Be advised, another suspect may be on site. Repeat, second hostile unaccounted for. I tightened my arms around Sarah, my heart pounding so loudly I could barely hear the marshal. Another suspect? Who else could be here? The marshal scanned the room with his gun raised. Stay behind me, he ordered, his eyes darting toward the hallway. But before we could move, the lights flickered, then went out completely. The darkness pressed in on us like a suffocating blanket. Sarah's trembling fingers gripped mine, her breath quick and shallow. From somewhere deep in the house came the slow, deliberate creak of a floorboard. Not Richard. Someone else. The marshal's flashlight beam cut through the blackness, sweeping across the hallway. And stopping on a tall figure at the far end. A woman. Her face partly hidden by shadows. When she stepped forward, I felt my knees weaken. It was Linda, Richard's sister. But she wasn't here to help. Her lips curled into a cold smile as she raised a small pistol, the barrel gleaming under the flashlight. I told him you'd ruin everything, she said, her voice dripping with hatred. And now you've left me no choice. The marshal shouted for her to drop the weapon. Instead, she aimed not at him but at me. I pushed Sarah behind me, my breath caught in my throat. The last thing I saw before the shot rang out was Linda's finger tightening on the trigger. The gunshot exploded in the dark, echoing through the house like thunder. I braced for pain, but instead I felt the marshal shove me hard to the floor. Sarah screamed. I scrambled up, my ears ringing, trying to see through the flashlight's shaky beam. Linda stood frozen, her eyes wide in shock. The pistol slipped from her hand and clattered to the ground. Blood. There was blood, but it wasn't mine. The marshal staggered back, clutching his shoulder. Stay down, he gritted, even as he dropped to one knee. Linda turned and bolted down the hall. Without thinking, I ran after her. The floorboards groaned beneath our feet. She darted into the kitchen, and straight toward the back door. I lunged, grabbing a fistful of her coat. She spun, her face twisted in rage, and slammed her elbow into my jaw. Stars burst in my vision, but I didn't let go. You don't understand, she hissed. He promised me everything, and you ruined it. We struggled, her nails clawing at my skin. Then her foot caught the leg of a chair, and she fell hard, her head smacking the tile. Her breath came in short gasps, her eyes darting toward the open door. Help me, she whispered. But the sound of sirens was already closing in. I didn't know if I was saving her, or sealing her fate. When I stepped aside to let the officers in, the officers swarmed the kitchen, shouting commands. Linda didn't resist. She just lay there, staring up at the ceiling, her chest rising and falling fast. One officer cuffed her while another radioed for an ambulance for the wounded marshal. I sat on the floor, holding my throbbing jaw, watching the chaos like I was outside my own body. Ma'am, are you hurt? An officer asked me. I'm fine, I said automatically, though I wasn't sure if that was true. They pulled Linda to her feet. That's when she looked at me, and for the first time her eyes softened, not with kindness but with something like pity. You still don't see it, do you? She whispered. He's been here the whole time. I frowned. Who? But she only gave a small, almost sad smile as they let her out into the flashing red lights. A detective stayed behind to question me. What did she mean? He asked. I shook my head. I don't know. I thought Richard was dead. The detective exchanged a glance with his partner. That's what we thought too. Until we found fresh fingerprints at one of the properties linked to him. My breath caught. Property. He nodded slowly. Yes. And one of them is less than 3 miles from here. Something cold slithered through me. If Richard really was alive, then Linda hadn't been my worst problem after all. The detective's words echoed in my head. Less than 3 miles from here. Felt impossible. 4 years I'd mourned Richard. 4 years I'd told myself the nightmares were just ghosts from the past. But ghosts don't leave fingerprints. They asked me to come to the station for more questions, but I refused to ride with them. I'll meet you there, I said, needing a moment to breathe, or maybe to prepare myself for whatever was coming. On the drive, every streetlight seemed to cast shadows shaped like Richard. At red lights, I kept checking the rearview mirror, half expecting his face to appear in the back seat. At the station, they showed me photographs. Some were of the property, an old warehouse with boarded windows. Others were of a man walking out at night. The photo was blurry, but the tilt of the head, the way his shoulders curved forward. I knew that shape. My stomach dropped. That's him, I whispered. That's Richard. The detective leaned forward. Then we need you to help us. If he's alive, he may still be watching you. He may even know you've seen this photo. A shiver ran down my spine. How do you know he's watching me? I asked. He slid another photo across the table. It was my house, taken from the street, 2 nights ago. I covered my mouth to stifle the scream rising in my throat. And then my phone buzzed on the table. An unknown number. One message. You're still mine. I stared at the words on my phone, my hands trembling so badly I almost dropped it. You're still mine. It wasn't just a threat. It was a claim. Richard wasn't hiding anymore. He wanted me to know. The detective grabbed the phone from my hand, reading the message with a grim expression. We'll trace it, he said. But his tone told me it wouldn't be that easy. Richard had always been smart, too smart. That night, they insisted on sending a patrol car to watch my house. But even with police outside, I couldn't shake the feeling that he was close. Maybe even watching from some dark corner I couldn't see. Around midnight, I heard a faint tapping on my bedroom window. At first, I told myself it was just a tree branch in the wind. Until I remembered there were no trees near that side of the house. The tapping stopped, replaced by a slow, deliberate scratching sound. My body froze. My breath caught. I forced myself to pull back the curtain. And there it was. A handprint. Pressed against the glass. Smudged, as if the palm had lingered there, waiting. I stumbled backward. My heart pounding so loudly I thought it would wake the neighbors. By the time I ran outside with the officers, the window was empty. But on the ground below, they found something half buried in the dirt. A small, rusted key. One I recognized instantly. It was the key to our old house, the one we'd lived in before he died. And along with it, a folded piece of paper. For words written in bold black ink. Let me in tonight. I remind you, as we'll said at beginning of my story, don't forget to subscribe and turn on notification. Thank for watching my story. God bless you all.